The rules are supposed to be simple. When the dollar weakens, you buy Bitcoin. When confidence in central banks erodes, you buy Bitcoin. When gold, the ancient fear trade, makes new highs, you buy Bitcoin. This is what we've been told to believe. And right now, the dollar is stumbling, central banks are openly discussing a world beyond it, and gold is trading near all-time highs. But Bitcoin, it isn't just lagging, it's crashing. This is more than just a sell-off. It's a violation of everything we think about Bitcoin. For well over a decade, a single story has powered this asset. Bitcoin is a hedge, the escape hatch, the antidote to monetary decay. That story is now broken. When the narrative and the price move in opposite directions, one of them is lying, and it's not the price. The dominant story begins with money, debt, and debasement. It's simple. First, central banks print money, then it devalues currencies, which then causes scarce assets like gold and Bitcoin to rise. It's a hedge against monetary decay, they say. This seemed to be proven by history. When the Fed flooded the system in 2020, Bitcoin soared. When it tightened in 2022, Bitcoin crashed. To some, this confirmed debasement, but for a small few, the conclusion was that Bitcoin is a high beta liquidity asset, which means it's a high risk trade based on access to easy money. But this story contains a fatal assumption that quote unquote money printing is a simple and uniform force. It assumes that a larger money supply automatically means a weaker dollar and a stronger Bitcoin. That assumption is wrong, and to see why, you have to look at what debasement actually means. The real problem begins with how debasement is measured. Most people look at total money supply on a linear chart. It looks explosive, but that's the wrong lens to use. Debasement isn't about levels. It's about the rate of change and the velocity of it. A currency can double in supply over decades without collapsing if no one is spending it. The post-2020 spike was a crisis response, but when you view it on a log scale over a 5-year window, it's not unprecedented. There's been other periods where we saw faster growth without runaway inflation, including under gold-backed systems pre-1970s Bretton Woods. This doesn't mean that debasement is fake. It just means the simple chart everyone uses is misleading. Debasement is not a switch, it's a slippery slope. The deeper flaw is focusing on money at all. Modern economies are credit-based systems. This changes how systems respond today in comparison to how the systems responded historically in the past. Money is created through debt. When debt levels are low, new money can stimulate growth. When debt is at record highs, now new money often just services old debts. It gets trapped in the financial system. This is why we can have a K-shaped economy, massive balance sheet expansion with subdued consumer inflation. Credit contraction can overwhelm money creation. This changes the game entirely because Bitcoin isn't responding to money printing, it's responding to the health of the credit cycle that it now uses as fuel. This is where Bitcoin now lives, not as an outsider to the system, but as a component inside of it. It's no longer the escape hatch that you were originally being sold. It's deeply integrated into the system more than you realize. Unless you're living under a rock, Bitcoin has become institutionalized, and institutionalization did not arrive through conviction. It arrived through a structure that onboarded these debt-based institutions. ETFs, corporate treasuries, pension allocations, structured products. These vehicles did not buy Bitcoin the way early adopters did. They didn't hold it in wallets. They don't treat it as a final settlement layer or peer-to-peer cash as originally intended. They treated it as exposure to a risky, speculative part of the market that soaks up new money and inflates in a bubble. This exposure is funded by debt. Their exposure is managed through risk models. The value of what they own is updated every day based on its current trading price. This distinction matters a lot more than the average Bitcoiner understands. A hardware wallet does not get margin called, but an ETF does, a treasury company does, and so do options traders. Most institutional exposure came with financing attached, direct loans, rehypothecation, credit lines. Most US ETFs break-even price for Bitcoin is around $84,000. Most US-based miners average all-in production costs of about $87,000. For Japan's largest Bitcoin treasury company, Metal Planet, their break-even price is around $102,000. And for Michael Saylor's strategy, their break-even is roughly $76,000. And also, there's millions of traders who are trading on leverage using futures and options trading. Professional and institutional trading desks operate with leverage too. They use 1.1x to 3x leverage for long-term positions. High leverage trades like 10x or 20x's still happen, but they're increasingly concentrated in offshore venues away from the United States. Even with lower than average leverage, the sheer volume of paper BTCs such as perps, ETFs, and futures means that derivatives still control price discovery of Bitcoin. Break-even levels clustered and risk is concentrated. When prices cross below those thresholds, selling becomes mandatory, not optional, not emotional, but an automatic operation done by algorithms. This is why the drawdowns are so sharp. It's why they accelerate quickly and why they overshoot most people's targets. Wall Streetification is not about regulation. It's about the integration with the very system people tell you that Bitcoin helps them escape from. Price discovery now happens through instruments designed for liquidity and not conviction. Cash settled futures allow for massive exposures without even touching the asset. Options create linear hedging flows. ETFs create passive demand and passive selling. Prime brokers lend against Bitcoin the same way they lend against equities. The asset becomes collateral. Collateral becomes balance sheet input. And once that happens, investor behaviors changes. Bitcoin stops trading like money and currency and it starts trading like software tech stocks. High beta, high volatility, and correlation spikes during stress in the markets. When portfolios are de-risked, Bitcoin is sold alongside with other equities, not because it failed, but because it's liquid and volatile. This now signals to us that Bitcoin is dollar coded. Bitcoin's price is now mediated by the dollar system itself, not insulated from it. The shift is visible in the data. Bitcoin's correlation with major indices has risen dramatically. In some periods, it approaches software stock correlations. Meanwhile, its correlation with gold has weakened, and at times it inverts. It's a structural change in how Bitcoin operates. The digital gold narrative is crumbling in real time. Institutional desks rebalance portfolios based on volatility targets. When volatility rises, exposure is cut. And Bitcoin's volatility is high, so it's reduced first. This happens regardless of whatever macro narratives you hear out there. Dollar down, dollar up, it doesn't matter, because what matters is the risk appetites from these firms who've basically cannibalized Bitcoin. Stablecoins reinforce this dynamic. Most Bitcoin trading happens on dollar peg tokens. These tokens are backed by treasuries. Treasuries anchor them to the dollar system. Stablecoins are not an escape from fiat, they're an extension of fiat. They tie crypto liquidity directly to the dollar-funded markets. When funding tightens, crypto tightens. This further dollar codes Bitcoin. Price discovery becomes a function of dollar liquidity, not Bitcoin scarcity. ETFs brought scale. They also brought fragility. ETFs introduced Bitcoin to holders with zero tolerance for drawdowns. These are retirees who came from a different era and have different tolerance for risk. They have little understanding of volatility and no operational control. They just see their retirement portfolios being wiped out and they run for the hills.
That's what I think the problem is with crypto. They've lost their way. Now that they've struggled, their biggest argument was adoption. All the boomers are going to buy crypto. The ones that did feel like schmucks because it's down 6% and silver's up 120 and gold's up 70%.
Passive flows are calm until they're not. Losses accumulate quietly and then the headlines change. Then redemptions accelerate. This pattern has played out in every asset class, and Bitcoin is not exempt. The average ETF holder is underwater. It sets the stage for a mass capitulation. One thing to keep in mind is that every major crypto drawdown has coincided with a leverage event. FTX, Terra Luna, COVID. This one feels similar because the structure is breaking. Institutional leverage is being purged from the system. That process is always violent and it's always non-linear. It ends when selling becomes exhausted, and so far, we have not reached that point yet. This is not the failure of the debasement trade, it's the exposure of its timing. Debasement does not express itself through belief, it expresses itself after leverage is gone. And Bitcoin can't act as a hedge while serving as collateral. It can't escape the dollar while being priced inside of it. Something has to give. So either leverage remains permanent or it's completely flushed out. And right now, it's flushing out. That reduces risk long term in Bitcoin, but it raises volatility short term. This is the cost of institutionalization that most people ignore. Bitcoin is going through what gold went through decades ago before it became a reserve asset, before it decoupled from credit cycles. But for those who believe Bitcoin is going to be a reserve asset, it has to survive being treated like one. Scarcity only matters after liquidation. Narratives only work after balance sheet liabilities are cleared out. And Bitcoin is not front running debasement, it's waiting for the system to finish breaking itself first. And that distinction explains everything that you're seeing right now. But once again, it's been your boy A. Cole. Hopefully you get it, you got it, you're good, you learned something, and I'll talk to you in the next one.